But there were times when, we got invaded. I mean, there was a night when I had a beeper. We had to carry a beeper at that point during those days, and the house parent beeped me and told me when I called back in, told me that two bums ran in the front door. One grabbed the other one, caught up to the other one by my office, and slit his throat. What should I do? We called the police, we called the ambulance. The guy lived. 6 months later, he came back and he wanted to volunteer, which I had to explain to him that we were fine. We didn't need his services. Um, but that was the deal. The house parent's job was to keep the street out there and keep order inside the house. And that entailed facing down pimps, uh, nasty boyfriends, irate fathers and mothers, um, often abusers, um, and it was dangerous. And we were unarmed. So that was the kind of thing that was a daily routine there back then. So that's kind of how it was in the beginning. The house parents walked the halls at night, one on duty. Flashlight was the electricity. The rooms upstairs were for the 25 beds, were separated, boys on one end of the hallway, girls on the other. 12 beds for non-security detention, 13 for runaways. No doors. Um, we're talking about teenage boys and girls who have the hormones working. You literally had to almost stand between them at times. It was pretty potent drive for them, okay? And they were looking for someone to hold and hug too. I mean, I don't fault them for that, but our job was to keep them from what you would expect, okay? So no doors, but just blankets as doors, and blanket to separate the hallway from the boys and the girls. We had some unique characters that worked there. Verna, the cook, was one of the most wonderful, loving women that you ever met. Older black woman, right out of the movies. Funny, a great cook, loved the staff, tough on the kids. She felt that they should be grateful that what they were getting. Uh, but they could have made a movie about Verna. She was such a cool lady. Marcus was one of my classmates. I brought him down after he graduated the year after me, and he worked his way up from house parent to counselor. Marcus had a tendency to it was tough for Marcus to let them go. Sometimes you just had to send them somewhere because we couldn't keep them forever. And Mark was the bleeding heart of all of us. He was hard to persuade to move a kid on if we didn't have the ideal situation for him, because sometimes we just weren't going to be able to have the ideal situation for them. Walter was very pragmatic. He was another house parent. All these guys were college degreed, making $2,400 a year. So we had George, who Dick Moran believed in the rehabilitation of people, and George had spent several years in Rayford, and when he came out, part I think of his parole was to do community service and whatever, and then Dick hired him at the bridge as a house parent. Oddly enough, whenever we did that, and it was successful, like in George's case, they were very hard on the kids. Their feeling was that if they would have got more tough love, they wouldn't have gone to prison. And they were very emphatic about that with the kids. But we had two or three of those kind of staff members, and they were good. They were good. We had maybe 5 or 6 that weren't, and they lasted a day or two. At $2,400 a year, it was it was tough to get MSWs to come work there as house parents. So masters in social work. The state counselors, particularly non-secure detention ones, were good and they were tough. Um, the ones who worked with the foster programs and the welfare systems, I'm not sure why a lot of them did it. They were not very good at it, and they didn't have the right attitude, and they were scared all the time. And they would bring some of the toughest, hardest kids in Florida and Dade County to us, and they would run out. They wouldn't even get them in the car with them without a police escort. Um, so we would get them dumped off at my door, and we'd have to try to rebuild some kind of trust with them because they knew, and not on fear, because they were used to scaring the shit out of everybody. So um, that's that's one of the things I remember. I remember Marcus standing in the steps, keeping a pimp from coming in to get his girl, and his bodyguard coming out with a gun. And I guess Mark would just figure, I don't know what Mark was doing, but I guess it's his way of telling him he wasn't afraid of him. But eventually the guy left, and I guess then Mark went inside and called the police. But that was in the daytime, though. So there were still other staff members around. But Mark was crazy. I had a kid I had sent his twin brother back to prison. This was near my end of my 3 years, and we got a call from Bay House, another program down the other end of Miami, that this young man had come by looking to gather some people to come and get me. They had warned me that he was coming to the bridge and that he had a gun, and I put everybody inside the house. And when he got there, I was sitting on the front steps, and I figured I'd talk him down. And he pulls out a 44 Magnum and puts it up in my nose, and all the kids are inside looking out the window at me inside the porch. And I convinced him that I wouldn't even hear the gun go off, just leave and we'll just let it go, and that I didn't send his brother back to jail, which I did, but it didn't seem appropriate to tell him that at the time. But anyway, he put the gun back in his pants, and he had cutoffs. You could see the barrel of the gun come out the bottom of his pants, and he got about halfway up to McDonald's at the corner, and I went in and I called the police and had him picked up. And I don't know what happened to him. So, but there was we had hundreds of stories like that. Every one of us went through 25, 30 of them. Probably everybody can remember their first confrontation, that getting between a big guy and a little guy, and you're by yourself. And I know my situation, the first time I had that, and I was a house parent at the time, it was like 2 a.m, and this ruckus broke out, and I got between them, and my stomach was churning, and I was afraid that if I had to get involved, I was going to hurt them. And then what? There must be a way. I'm going to have to learn how to diffuse these things without physical confrontations every time. And sometimes you couldn't. But my first one I did, and I started to gain a confidence in my ability to talk people down with honor, so they didn't feel so embarrassed and so forth. But that was part of the territory. You were sheriff at the time too, So that was how it was back then. I probably should go on and on about Peggy Moran, what a great inspiration she was to be around. Marcus and Walter and Tom Brown and all these guys, all these people. They were just wonderful, covering each other's back and there for all the right reasons. We knew we couldn't fix everybody. We knew we weren't going to fix most. But we wanted to make our mark where we could, and I'm sure we did. And I look back at that, and those were the years that we, certainly me, but I know listening to the other guys, we felt alive. We were doing something, and I'm sure your staff has that same feeling. Can't help them all, you can't fix them all, but you can make your mark. So the constant struggle between getting too involved and not getting involved enough. I remember all the advice I was getting, don't get too involved, don't get too involved. You can't do your job if you don't get involved. But if you do get involved, and the more you get involved, the sooner you're going to burn out. I made a decision like the other guys I was with. We'll burn out then, but we'll do our job while we're here. And it's kind of a conflict that probably every counselor goes through, and probably all your people do too. So if I can answer any questions, you have my contact information. I'm so proud of what you did with the program. I'm so proud of us looking back at how we got it started. Um, I guess someone might be able to tell you the story of, Martinez and Zamora and the trial that lawyer Rubin had in Dade County and using television brainwashing to defend a kid who murdered his next door neighbor, this old lady. And one of the kids that was with him when he did that was sent to our program. And the night before he was supposed to get there, he rifled a mailbox. He's going to be facing trial for murder as a juvenile. And but anyway, lots of those kind of stories too. So thank you for having an interest in the beginning of the bridge. Someone might be able to bridge. Manelli can bridge the time from downtown Miami into Liberty City. Tom Brown would too, but Tom Brown had a stroke, and I'm not sure he's up for all this at the time right now. But I'll talk to him. He was there for the transition as well. I came back 2 years later to visit, and they were in Liberty City, and the program was a step up from when we had it. Dick was still running it and so forth. But then I think Liberty City burnt down in the riots, and one of the kids that I had, Benny Higdon, was torn to pieces. I mean, literally torn to pieces, coming through Liberty City when the riots happened. Benny was one of the kids that he was a poster child for Peter Jennings, I think it was, special Violence in America on ABC. A few years after I left, and they told the story of Benny Higdon. He was just one of the kids that they interviewed, and he was kind of a central character in this whole documentary. But he eventually was killed coming back from fishing on Key Biscayne, and I think that was the story. Matter of fact, I read about him in Time magazine or something afterwards. He was one of the victims that didn't make it through town when things got rough that weekend. So anyway, thank you for your time, and I hope this is of some use to you. And after I get done doing this, I'm probably going to remember 1,000 things I wanted to tell you that was probably more relevant than what I did. But anyway, thank you for your time.